use these bigger rods. Make sure you don't grab one that has a cone on the ends, because those are for blowing. We don't want to use those. So we grab one of these bigger ones. And we're going to start by getting a nice big gather. But we don't want to go too big. Because if we go too big, these are 3 gather paperweights. They get really big really quickly. So this thicker diameter pipe is going to make it easier to control heavier pieces, but you don't want to go huge. And I'm going to do what we call our flip-flop move. I'm going to lay it down in one color, flip it over, lay it down again in the same color. And then I'm going to lay down my other 2 sides in a different color. Flop, 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 flop. Center that back up a little bit. I'm going to get a second coat of color on this, so I'm going to melt that in, and we'll come back and do that again. Flip, flop, flip, flop. Alright, that's plenty of color for me. Try your best not to get the colors mixed together, not to like drop a bunch of chunks of one color into another. Lift it up, wait a second before you go into the next one. Otherwise, you're going to mix them all up and make a mess. Melt that in. And then I'm going to marble it into a hot dog. Got a nice little hot dog. With stripes of color up the sides, 2 different colors, and then the tip is blank. It's fine. Now, I'm going to cool off the tip a little bit by spraying some water on it. After my next heat, I'm going to use my diamond shears to grab onto that end. Having that cooled off makes it so that when I grab on, it's not going to just squish under my shears and grab a skinny spot. It's going to be a nice, thick, cold handle to grab onto. So we're going to heat that up. I'm going to come back over. I'm going to add a little bit of water again, and then I'm going to grab on, stretch it out, pulling this way, and I'm going to be turning the pipe away from myself as I do that. That's going to twist this up into kind of a ropey look. After I've stretched it out, I'm going to bring the shears over to this side over here. And from here, as I continue turning the pipe, it's going to start spooling the glass up around the center, coiling and tangling it around itself to create a knot in the middle of your paperweight. Try to put all your tools back the right way, guys. Alright, so we'll get that hot, we'll cool the tip, grab on, pull, turn, bring it to the side, tangle it up. It needs to be really hot for this move because a lot of the stuff is happening very quickly. If you linger and take your time on this move, you'll get stuck halfway done and it will be frozen up. So you gotta be quick. So we're gonna spray it down. Grab on with the shears and start pulling and turning. And I bring it to the side, and I let it kind of tangle up and spool around itself, making most of this tangled up ball like out past the end of the pipe. Now, I don't like for this knob at the end to be in my finished piece, so I usually just cut that off. And if you can't cut all the way through, you can take your tweezers and tap it to have it come off after you've established the constriction. And now I'm going to gather on top of this, and that's going to be the kind of centerpiece of my paperweight. At this stage, if you want to, you can heat it up and marver it into kind of a bullet shape to smooth it out. Or you can just gather, and all these little indentations are going to have little bubbles stuck in them. Either way is fine. So I'm going to gather on top of this. And then I'm going to add on some patches of white. Big gathers, because these grow and grow and grow, and then they just end up really hard to work with if you get too much. I'm going to shape it up a little bit first, because I want this to be a nice, even, kind of duck shape. Heat that up and we'll get some patches of white on there. Now it's up to you where you put your third color. You can cover the whole tip of it, you can cover the sides. If you want to get color just on the tip, bring the back end up high and roll the tip through. If you want to get color just on the sides, lower the back end down and roll the sides through. I'm going to go tap, tap, tap to get 3 little patches of color. Now we've got little white splotches on there. Melt that in. And next comes the fun part. Now, come in a little closer, everybody. This next step we're going to do, with the tweezers, I can add some little accents into these patches of white that I've added on. There's 3 accents I can do. I can do a vortex by pinching and twisting. I can do a line by pinching straight with the sides of the tweezers. Or I can make a little cusp by poking with the tips pinched together, just like when we poke with the poking stick. So I'm going to show you all 3 of those. And then gather over that. I'll go pinch, 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 pinch and twist, pinch and twist, pinch and twist. And then right on the top of the paperweight, I'm going to put a little bubble right up there. Okay. Once again, if you want to, you can smooth all this out before you gather on it. Or you can gather on it just like it is, and it'll have some bubbles trapped here and there. But by adding on little patches of color, I've made it so all these little accents will look at like flow in the color. This would be good for someone with a J name. J's
I didn't even notice that. Yeah, you're right.
Letting it cool down, and now I'm going to gather on top of this. Then I'm going to shape it up. Now this time, I'm going to start shaping it with my block tool, and then after I've gotten a heat, I'm going to switch over to shaping it with my newspaper. The newspaper, the block, and the marver all do very similar jobs to one another. The block is the most limited in what it can do. The newspaper is the most versatile. You don't need to know how to use all three, and if you're not planning to take a bunch more classes, probably don't try to learn all three, because it's a lot to learn, and you'll probably not master any of them if you try to learn all three. But the newspaper, what we're going to do is you have the newspaper in your hand with your thumb along one side and your fingers on the other side, and we lift up underneath the glass. Don't try to pinch and squeeze the glass, just lift. And I usually lift with my fingers to do my low angle roll like on the marver. So I'll be lifting up like this to get my low angle roll, and I push with my thumb to get my high angle roll. So it's like this, okay? You can see how quickly it gets big when you're working with 3 gathers. Lifting upward. Alright, there's our start. Now I'm going to heat this up. Use newspaper to finish off the shape. We can make it round. We can make it egg shaped. We can make it a big old torpedo. What are you guys feeling? Now, just like with the blocks, if this isn't wet, it's going to stick to my glass. So periodically, stop, add a little bit of water. Not a lot, because if you add too much, it's going to act like dripping water on your glass and it's going to make it crack. Do one more time. Okay, then we'll heat it up, put in the jack line, all quits. Questions?
Not yet.
We need people to ask questions.
The questions come when you're doing it, and you realize you can't forgot or you made a mistake. It's so logical when you explain it.
I've heard that instead of asking for questions, you should demand questions. You say, ask a question. And then people have questions, they just don't ask them. It's like, come on, just give me a question. That helps guide the discussion so we can all learn from it, you know?
Can we make it smaller than that?
You should.
Even though you're using the bigger pipe.
Yeah, so the way to make it smaller is to start from a smaller gather on your first gather.
And the pulling, the twisting, that came on
First gather.
the first gather.
It always gets a little bit shorter when you do your jack line, so if you want it to be a sphere, you make it a little bit longer than a sphere, and it'll shrink down. Do like 1.25 height to width. If you want a sphere, you should make it like, make the height 1.25 to the width. Because it will get shorter when you do your jack line.
Have you ever been to the museum? They have a bunch of these kind of glass, like when you go into their main entrance, you have like the ground floor, they have these spears that have these glass, blue glass things on the top. There's like 50 of them.
Huh, I don't remember that. They have one really nice glass piece there by Preston Singletary. You guys should check that out.
So who's the guy that does the birds? Black bird.
He does do birds, yeah. But his piece in there is red.
But that's cast, right?
No, he's a blower. No, his piece in there is gold. He does do birds though.
Yeah.